Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. When I was young and reckless, I sometimes drank quite heavily. I have no idea how it happened that I was never stopped, because there were many nights when I found myself in the parking lot of my apartment complex and had no idea how I got there. One night I got so drunk that I tripped and fell on the railroad track as I staggered back to my car. I tried to stand up, but I couldn't keep my balance and just plopped down between the wooden sleepers and rocks like a newly caught trout. About the time I was thinking about just sleeping it off right there, a bright light suddenly enveloped me and I heard a train whistle. I looked up and saw a giant engine bearing down on me, signaling my imminent demise. In a panic, I tried to get up again and again, but I couldn't. I finally regained enough control of my body to crawl away about 10 seconds before I was crushed by his steel wheels. Later that night, when I sobered up, I made a promise to myself: never get drunk again. No, I didn't go to AA. I didn't go through any 12-step programs, and I didn't stop drinking. Since that night, I've just been drinking responsibly. I never got drunk again, or even a little drunk. Walking with guys, I drank 1 or 2 beers all night. On dates, I might have had a glass of wine, but that was it. I am the same today. I haven't had such a high in over a decade. That's why one evening I was surprised when my wife Cora and 2 of our friends, Brad and Susie Cunningham, seemed to be trying to get me drunk. I suspected there was some kind of bet going on. Someone was betting that they could get me drunk, and someone was betting against them. I hoped my wife was the last one. We always need a little extra money. The evening started quite normally. 2 days before, Cora informed me that she had invited the Cunninghams to dinner. I wouldn't call them our best friends, but we had known each other for several years and dated from time to time. Cora and I were still in the kitchen when she saw the headlights of their car hit the panoramic window in the living room as they turned into the driveway. "Darling, could you get the roast out of the oven while I go greet them?" Cora asked, untying the bow behind her apron. "Of course, honey. You go let them in, and I'll be there in a minute." I put on a pair of oven mitts and heard the murmur of the usual welcome jokes coming from the hallway as I pulled the roaster out of the oven. I put it on the stove and made sure everything was ready. I was on my way to the merry threesome when everything suddenly went quiet. As I turned the corner, I thought I caught some kind of whisper between the 3 of them. Of course, I had no reason to be suspicious yet. Hey, there won't be any secrets in this house," I joked. My hilarious comment seemed to take them all by surprise. "Hello, old man," Brad replied, jumping back first. "Hi, Steve," Susie cut in before I could answer her husband. She reached out and kissed me on the cheek while Cora hung their coats in the hallway closet. "Hey, what does a guy have to do to get a drink here?" Brad bellowed as we shook hands. Now I was a little puzzled. We barely said hello, and he was already pestering me for a drink? I began to wonder if they had already had a couple before they came. "Just follow me," I replied. They all followed me into the office and took their seats while I played host and prepared drinks. I handed Cora and Susie each a glass of white wine. Brad was a vodka and martini lover. I didn't have to ask. If he ever changed his drink, I would have fainted. I opened the lid of my light beer just before handing Brad his martini. "Why don't you make one for yourself and join me?" "No, I'll stick to what I have," I replied. Beer, beer, beer," he muttered. "You're not fun. Come on, Steverino, be a man today. Make yourself a real drink," he said, raising his martini to illustrate. "A real drink?" To my great surprise, Cora intervened. "Yes, dear. I don't think I've ever seen you with anything but beer before. Why not join Brad?" I looked at my wife, stunned. We never really talked about why I don't drink a lot. I wasn't proud of the way I was beaten. Unlike some people, I have never considered drinking to be one of the main achievements in life, so I never discussed it with Cora. I didn't try to hide it from her. It just never came up in conversation. However, after 7 years of marriage, one would think that she knows that I don't drink to get drunk. Her comment was my first hint that something was going on. Whatever it was, it must have been what they were whispering about when they first entered. This meant that all 3 of them were involved in this. My mind immediately went into search mode. What can they plan? It must have something to do with my drinking, or with his absence. I came to the only conclusion that came to my mind: a bet? Since no one had ever seen me drunk before, I was sure Brad was bragging that he could get me drunk, and Cora probably bet him that he couldn't. But why did she encourage me to drink? Maybe she just wanted to make sure Brad and Susie couldn't accuse her of cheating when it came time to pay up. Or maybe it was Susie who made a bet in my favor. Maybe later, I said. It all seemed so strange. I needed time to think about it. I started to really doubt that my wife was in my corner at dinner when she tried to give me another beer before I was even halfway through the first one. I figured the only way to figure out what the hell was going on was to play along. But how? I couldn't pour my beer down the drain and say I drank it. It's too noticeable. I've come up with a plan. After dinner, we all retired to the living room. Cora and the Cunninghams took their seats, and I headed for the bar. Another martini, Brad? Is the Pope shitting in the woods? I guess that's a yes, I replied to the rude remark. You know, maybe I'll have a drink with you. I'll make a jug. I watched carefully as everyone looked at each other and grinned. That's when I realized that maybe they were all trying to get me drunk, just to see if they could. That was all I could think about. Well, the joke will be on them. I was going to play it to the end. While everyone was talking and not paying attention to me, I made 2 jugs, one with a martini and the other with lemon water. If I put it in a martini glass and drop an olive in it, no one will know anything. I put the martini on the counter and the other jug on the shelf behind the counter. As long as no one saw me pouring them, I was free. I brought another glass of white wine for each of the ladies, and then returned for a martini. As I handed Brad his glass, I felt everyone's eyes on me as I took a sip from mine. I would have liked to start acting drunk immediately, but obviously they would never buy it. So I had to stay calm for a while and let myself get drunk slowly. While we were sitting and talking, it didn't take me long to drain my glass. I got up and walked over to the bar. Brad, is there another one? No, thanks, Steve. I still have some, but you keep going. After making sure no one was watching, I poured more lemon water, added an olive, and joined the group. I didn't want it to look obvious, so I spent a little more time on it. After another 20 or 30 minutes of conversation, Cora asked for more white wine. Yeah, me too, said Susie. You could do another round for all of us, Stivers, Brad added. And again, I poured drinks on all sides. I've only had 1 beer so far, but everyone thought I'd had 3 martinis on top of that. It's time to start showing some effects. I deliberately started talking a little slower, even stopping a couple of times to collect my thoughts. Over the next hour, I had 2 more against everyone else's 1. By then, I had let my eyelids droop and slurred my speech. I just sat in silence for a few minutes, shaking my head up and down. I needed to make it believable, so I struggled to my feet, staggered over to the bar and poured myself another one, then staggered back and plopped down on a chair. I finished it in 3 gulps before finally closing my eyes and letting my chin fall on my chest. That's where I stayed. I heard Susie's voice first. Is he asleep? Cora started shaking my shoulder. Honey, are you okay? He blacked out like a light, I heard Brad say. I knew I could get him drunk under the table. I'm not sure that's going to work, Cora said. Of course it will work, dear. When he wakes up tomorrow thinking we made love together, he's going to feel damn guilty. You know him. He will be devastated. What a? It didn't look like any kind of bet to me. I sat perfectly still and listened. That's the thing, Susie, I just can't do this to him. Come on, Cora, I heard Brad say. Can't you back off now after all this? No way. Yes, Cora, come on. So far, the plan has worked perfectly. He will be completely convinced that we had love. As soon as he thinks we've already slept together, Brad is convinced that he can persuade him to switch again, only the next time he's sober. We've been talking about this, Cora. Yes, I know, but talking about it and actually doing it are 2 different things. Okay, the only decision I had to make was whether I wanted to fight for my marriage or throw Cora on her ass. Her voice sounded like she was retreating. I could give her the benefit of the doubt, just open her eyes and stop everything in its path. The problem is, I've always wondered if she would have gone through with it. This little unanswered question will haunt me until I die. So I'm going to pretend a little more and see what she's going to do. If she decides to move on, I'll throw her out along with the other 2. I noticed someone getting up from the couch, and then I heard Brad's voice. Come on, let's take him upstairs. I'll take him by the shoulders. Susie, grab his legs. Come on, Cora, help us. Brad grabbed me under the armpits. I was about to put an end to all this when Cora's panicked voice gave me new hope. Stop. No, no, I can't do that. I must be crazy to agree to this. Cora, we are… No, Brad, no. I'm not going to cheat on Steve. He's a good husband. I love him, and I'm not going to risk losing him. Cora, you're not going to lose him, Susie said. He can't blame you for sleeping with Brad if he thinks he slept with me. I don't care, Cora replied decisively. I don't care. I won't let that happen. I think you guys should leave. Brad started to argue. Damn it, Cora. We are… Cora said to leave. Now get out of my house, you bastard, and take your wife with you, I shouted, jumping up from the couch, surprising everyone. And don't ever come here and talk to me or Cora again. Oh my God, Cora exclaimed, pressing her hand to her mouth. All three of them almost jumped out of their skin. Brad thought he could talk himself out of it. Us. We were just joking, old man. We knew you were faking it. Brad, if you're not out of this house by the time I count to 3, I swear you and I will do it. 1. Okay. Come on, Susie, let's go. I looked at my wife, whose fear manifested itself in the form of salty drops of moisture flowing from her eyes and down her cheeks. If you want to go with them, go right now. You can use dear old Brad anytime you want, I growled. No, she said, shaking her head. Please, Steve, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I would never do that. But you talked about it, didn't you? She knew I'd heard every word they said, and she couldn't deny it. She just looked at me, begging for mercy with her tear-stained eyes. Have you made love to them yet? No, never. I swear, she cried decisively. I stood and looked at her for a few seconds. Her whole body was literally shaking. If I hadn't been listening to the conversation, I wouldn't have believed her, but from what I heard, it sounded like it was their first relationship. I still haven't decided whether our marriage will continue or not. What was so important about changing partners with them? Do you have feelings for Brad? No, not at all. I don't know. One day Susie and I were talking, and the whole conversation somehow developed. The next thing I remember, she said Brad was talking about swapping partners. And you agreed with that? It was a statement, not a question. Well, not right away. I said you'd never agree to this. Then Brad hatched this plan. Susie and I talked about it a few more times. Damn, it seems like every time we meet, we only talk about it. So this is Susie? Do you want to make love to Susie? No, Steve, it's not like that. What then? I asked, raising my voice. I'm trying to figure out what the hell would make you do that. I saw her face twist at the direct question. I have to tell you, Cora, right now I'm fighting with myself to keep this marriage alive. You can't even imagine how much you let me down tonight. I keep asking myself how a wife who claims to love her husband could be so scheming behind his back. You said it yourself. If your plan had worked, I would have been devastated, thinking that I had deceived you. It's not something you only realized tonight. It's something you knew the whole time you were planning your dirty little betrayal. This is what you were counting on. Regardless of the circumstances, you knew how guilty I would feel, and you were going to use that guilt against me. It broke the curse. Cora burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. I'm not made of stone. As angry and offended as I was, I didn't enjoy seeing her like this. Part of me wanted to hug her and comfort her, but most of me saw her pain as a small measure of justice. I wasn't going to hug her, but I didn't want to stand and watch her cry either. So I turned around, went back to the kitchen and got a beer from the fridge. It took a good 10, maybe 15 minutes before Cora pulled herself together and joined me at the kitchen table. She washed her face in the bathroom sink, a folded napkin in her hand. She raised her head and looked at me from the opposite side of the table. She seemed to want to say something, but she just couldn't say it. I waited for a few moments, but I had questions that I needed to answer, so when it didn't look like she was going to volunteer anything, I started again. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think about the answer before you just blurt it out. She rubbed the corner of her eye with a napkin and nodded. Do you still love me? I mean, like you used to? Do you still love me as much as when we first got married? Or have you lost it? Have I lost it? I don't need to think. Steve, yes, I still love you today as much as when we first got married, maybe even more. Then why, Cora? Me? I guess I just never thought we'd actually do anything. Eh, it was just something like that. Fantasies, something naughty, perverted, which is fun to think about and talk about. When Brad said he could get you drunk, I remember thinking, yes, this is going to be the day. In all the time we've known each other, I've never seen you drunk. When Brad came up with his plan, the three of us talked. It was exciting, but deep down I knew it would never happen. Then why did you try so hard to make it happen? You almost challenged me to have a martini with Brad. You tried to buy me another beer at dinner. You looked like you were trying to do it. I know what I did. I don't know. I guess there was a part of me that wanted to see if we could really do it. But me, I would never do that, Steve, honestly. When it dawned on me what we were really going to do, there was no way I was going to do this to you. You have to believe it, Steve. I really love you. I could never hurt you like this, she sobbed. I think the pain of betrayal has almost blocked that part of my mind. She didn't go through with it. When it came to that, she backed off. That's the only reason I haven't walked out the door yet. So, I think I would go full circle. I had to make the same decision I had made an hour ago. I needed to think, maybe talk to someone. This could well be the most important decision of my life. Cora, I think we need a couple of days away from each other. I'm going to check into a motel where I can be alone for a while and think. Steve, please don't do this. I will? I'll give you some space. I'll be quiet and not bother you. But I need you to be with me. No, I need time to really look at our marriage. I just don't believe that a truly loving spouse would go behind her husband's back and plan something like this. You said it was fun and exciting. It bothers me, Cora. Even if you didn't go for it, how can it be fun to plan such a betrayal against the person you love? No, I'm not buying it. I was trying to put myself in your shoes. I would never have intended to hurt you, even if I hadn't intended to. It wouldn't give me any pleasure to come up with a plan behind your back, and I damn well wouldn't find it funny. Cora was crying so hard that I wasn't sure she even heard what I said. I needed to get out of there. I packed up some things and returned to the kitchen with a suitcase in my hand. She tried her best not to cry. I think she wanted to try again to persuade me to stay, but I wasn't going to give her that chance. I told Cora I'd call her in a day or two and left. I had every intention of checking into one of the many motels in the area, but as I headed towards the motel row, I had another thought. I came from a small town in Indiana, about 80 miles from where I was living now. My mom died a couple of years ago, but my dad still lived in the house I grew up in. I always thought he was a pretty smart guy. I changed the route and drove the car towards the expressway. Even with little traffic, the winding county roads in Indiana slowed me down. I was so busy with my problems that I didn't even think about the time. When I pulled into Dad's driveway, the lights were off in the house. I took my phone out of my pocket and checked. It was almost 2 in the morning. I wasn't sure what to do, and I had almost decided that I would sleep in the car until morning when I saw the light come on. A couple of minutes later, the porch light came on. By the time I got to the door, he had already opened it. "Son," he said, shocked. "What's going on? Someone got hurt, Cora?" "No, not really, Dad. Physically she's fine. But, well, we're having some problems. I wanted to talk to you, but I'm very tired. Is it okay if I stay here tonight?" "Of course," he replied. "You know where it is." We both went to bed. I didn't realize how tired I was. Between the stress and the long ride, it feels like I fell asleep before my head even touched the pillow. The first thing I remembered after I went to bed was the smell of fresh coffee the next morning. Dad had already showered and dressed when I followed my nose into the kitchen. He was waiting for me at breakfast. I stumbled over to the counter, took a cup from the cabinet, and poured myself some Colombian drink before joining him. "Dad, how did you know that I arrived here late last night?" "It was downright creepy. We had some problems with the children in the neighborhood. They shot windows in cars and houses with a shotgun. I probably slept with my ear open and didn't even realize it. I heard you drive up before you turned off the engine." I just shook my head. For as long as I can remember, there has always been a gang of local hooligans who cause trouble of one kind or another. Of course, there was a time when I was probably considered one of them. "Are you ready to tell me why my son ended up in my driveway at 2 in the morning?" It was my father, straight to the point. I nodded my head and took a sip of black gold. Cora and a couple of friends tried to do something to me last night, which I just can't believe she would do something like that. He didn't say anything, just waited for me to continue. She and a married couple we know tried to get me drunk. The plan was to make me think that I was in love with another woman. I guess they'll try to use this to convince me to switch wives. Was that something Cora agreed with? He tried. I sat down and told Dad the whole story. How I first thought it was a bet. How I faked fainting. Why Cora said she did what she did. All of this. So Cora really thought you'd blacked out when she announced the end of everything? Yes, I have no doubt that she really thought I was drunk. I put on a good show. Well, of course I can see your disappointment in her, he said with a sigh. What are you going to do? I don't know. That's why I came here, to talk to you. It's just so hard for me to believe that it would give her any pleasure to plot against me like that. I guess I'm wondering if someone who really loves you can do it. I could almost see the wheels turning in his head when Dad got up and poured himself another cup of coffee. He was still thinking when he returned and sat down again. Has she ever done anything like this before? No, it was completely unexpected. As far as you know, she's never cheated on you, right? That's right. You know me, Dad. I believe in loyalty. I would never tolerate cheating. He was still thinking. Do you have any idea how many times in your life you've been given a second chance, son? So you think I should give her a second chance? He took a sip of the drink he had just poured. People aren't perfect, Steve. We all have our flaws. I remember when you were younger. Your mother and I were so worried about what you were drinking. We've talked to you a couple of times, but it doesn't seem to help. From time to time, we received messages from friends or neighbors who saw you so drunk that you could barely walk. Your mother and I felt so helpless, but you were old enough to be responsible for your actions, and we couldn't lock you in your room. We were sure you'd end up either in jail or in a funeral home, but you didn't do either. One day you just seemed to straighten up. It was a real miracle for your mother and me. You can't imagine how relieved we both felt. I have no idea what happened that turned your life around so much, but I have a suspicion that it has something to do with some kind of second chance. Now, of course, a second chance doesn't always work. Some people ignore it without taking advantage of it. Some, like you, use it to change their lives. It's up to the person to determine what's going on. Unfortunately, there are many people who have never had a second chance. What a shame. In my opinion, everyone deserves this opportunity. If they blow it up, they'll only have themselves to blame for the consequences. But I wonder how much better the world would be if everyone had a second chance. I sat and thought about that night on the tracks. I still felt the fear I felt when I looked up and saw my imminent death coming at me like this. I wonder if Cora felt the same fear when she saw the ruin of our marriage falling on her. Would it scare her the way it scared me? How long will you be here, son? My father interrupted my train of thought. Oh, well, I was going to stay for the weekend, but now I think it's time for me to go home soon, Dad. I hope you don't mind. Not at all, he replied with a smile. We sat down and talked a little more about other things. A little later, I helped him with some yard work, but I was returning home the same day. I kept thinking about what my father had said about a second chance. If she hadn't spoken up when she did it and put an end to it, I wouldn't even have thought about it, but she did. However, it will take some time before I fully trust her again. Until then, I will remain vigilant. When I entered, I was surprised to hear music coming from the study. That's all. She was sitting at home alone and crying, just as I imagined. I startled her when I appeared at the door. She looked up, and I saw her catch her breath. I'm not sure what I expected to see. The music must have confused me. She was standing at the ironing board, ironing one of my shirts, and hung up 4 or 5 more. What the hell? I was going crazy here all by myself. I didn't know when you were coming home or if you'll come home, she said with sadness in her voice. I had to do something to try to distract myself from my thoughts. The music helped, but I did. No, I felt closer to you by stroking some of your shirts. She looked at me expectantly. She was waiting for me to announce the fate of our marriage. The worry on her face was hard to miss. I saw her literally holding her breath. I can't tell you how disappointed I am in you. The fact that you might find it exciting, or even find some pleasure in plotting against me anyway, just makes me cringe. Steve, I'm really sorry. I know you're sorry, I know, I said, interrupting her. I didn't need any more. I'm sorry. You and I have never really discussed what we expect from each other in terms of loyalty. I didn't think we'd have to do this. I've always assumed that you feel the same way I do. Now I'm wondering if you could be a little more relaxed about this topic than I am. I spent the night with my father. He asked me a question, which I answered immediately, as far as I knew. But on the way home, I started to wonder. You see, that's the problem with opening Pandora's box, Cora. It's like a judge who once took a bribe and was caught. Every case he has ever ruled on is then called into question. People suspect that other decisions he made in the past may have been the result of another bribe. My father asked if you had ever cheated on me. I said no, but now I'm not so sure. Never, she said flatly. Steve, I've never done anything with another man that I wouldn't do in front of you, I swear. I'll swear on the Bible in front of our pastor. I'll swear it. I'll take a lie detector test. I'll do whatever you suggest. Okay, a lie detector is an opportunity. I have to think about it. Meanwhile, our marriage is on very shaky ground, Cora. I have lost not only my trust, but also my respect for you. It will be up to you to get both back if you want this marriage to continue. And you? Now she was crying again. You mean I want this to go on? Yes, of course I do. Steve, I will never do anything like this again in my life. You're not the only one who's lost respect. I've lost it for myself. Okay, then consider this a second chance at a happy marriage. There won't be a third one, so I pray that you do your best. I will, Steve. And she did it. She worked hard to regain my trust and respect. Some of us were lucky enough to face the unexpected consequences of our actions and get a second chance to redeem ourselves. I'm one of those lucky ones. Cora is the other one. Brad and Susie weren't so lucky. 7 months after our incident, I heard that they were getting divorced. I do not know why. I do not care. Neither Cora nor I ever spoke to them again. End.